I decided to create a to-do list app and then used it to make sure that I don't miss anything on my trip to Hyderabad. That's right, I do use all the apps that I create because it's personalized to my liking and I really like the person who makes them. The first thing that I'm going to do is to create a folder for our app. For that, I'm going to open the terminal. If you're using the Windows system, go ahead and open the command prompt. And here I'm going to write on expo init and the name of our folder. So I'm going to write on to do app. Here init means initialization. We are initializing our app folder. Now go ahead and click the blank template. It is going to download all the JavaScript dependencies needed for app development. After it finishes downloading all the JavaScript dependencies required, this message is going to appear on the screen. Your project is ready. And now we have to open the folder in the Visual Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and close the terminal and then I'm going to open Visual Studio. I'm going to select on this open option and I'm going to select the folder that we have just created, that is to do app. For seeing the output, I am going to open the simulator. I have created a detailed video on how to download and run an iOS simulator on a Mac operating system. I am going to put the link of the video in the description box below if you want to have a look at it. Now I am going to jump right into app.js because that's where my code is. This is the default code that comes with the folder that we have just now created. For checking the output, I'm going to open the terminal. And here I'm going to write on npm start. Since we have our simulator ready, I'm going to press I. It is going to take some time to boot up for the very first time, but later on it is going to be very quick. The default output has come on the screen. I don't want this text, so I'm going to delete this one. And instead, I'm going to use the first component of our app, that is going to be the image background component. The first thing that I'm going to do for adding an image in the background is to import the image. Now this is the image that I'm going to use. I have downloaded it from Google. I really like the simplicity of this image. You of course can use any other image that you like. For importing the image, I'm going to simply drag this image into my assets folder. Now I'm going to go back to my app.js and here import an image background component from the React Native library. Now let us go ahead and use this image background component. I'm going to keep my simulator ready just to see the output. I've created the opening and closing of the image background. Now here, first of all, I'm going to mention the source. Source is basically the address of the image that you're going to use. Since our image is present inside the assets folder, first of all, I'm going to write down require parentheses, a pair of quotes, dot and a /. Now from the options, I'm going to select the assets folder. Because my image is present inside the assets folder, I'm going to put one more / and then write down the name of the image, that is to do dot JPEG. There are some errors coming, but don't worry, it is going to go away very soon. The next thing that I'm going to do is write on resize mode, and I'm going to set it to cover because I want the background image to cover the entire screen. Also, I'm going to style it. For styling, I'm going to just use flex and I'm going to set it to 1. I have created a detailed video on the concept of flex. I'm going to put a link of that in the description box as well if you want to know about flex in detail. The output is still not coming because I have put the image background inside a view component, which was by default, and this view component is styled by using the label styles.container. Let us go ahead and see the container. In the container, align items and justify content are present. That is the reason the output is not coming. So I'm going to delete this, and there you go. The image has come perfectly on the screen. So if you have put your image background component inside another view and then you have styled it, make sure that you don't have those two things present. Before moving on, let me quickly talk about flex. Flex 1 means that I want this background image to be present on the entire screen. That is why I have written 1 here. I don't want the screen to be broken down into pieces. I want the screen to be in one whole part. Suppose I want the image to come only on half of the screen, then instead of 1, I'm going to mention 0.5. As you can see, the output has come only on half of the screen. If you increase it to 0.8, it is going to cover 80% of the screen. And then if you increase it to 1, that means it is going to cover 100% of the screen. Now, I need a component that will allow me to enter texts in my app. React Native has a component that is meant to do exactly that. It's called the text input component. I'm going to show you how to use this component. First of all, I'm going to import the component from the React Native library. Next, I'm going to use it. And I'm going to put this text input component inside a parent view component. I'm first going to style the parent view component, justify content to center, and align items to center as well. The second thing that I'm going to do is styling this text input itself. But for that, I'm going to take help of the style sheet. Here I'm giving it a label. I'm going to call it as input box. And then I'll go up and I'll attach this label in the style. The name of the style sheet is styles. And then after that, I'm going to write an input box. Since we are using the style sheet, there is no need for an extra curly bracket. Just one pair will be enough. The first thing that I'm going to set is going to be the width. I'm setting it as 80%. That is 80% of the device width. Next, I'm going to set height. In that, I'm going to set it to 50. That is 50 pixels. And then I'm going to set border width. I'm going to set it to 5. Border color. I will be using the RGBA notation. 230 is going to be the red value. Blue is going to be 191 and green is going to be 131. And for alpha value, I'm going to set it to 0.7. Here is our input box, but the positioning is not correct. It is way too much at the top. So the next thing that I'm going to do is obviously margin top. Looks better now. And the last thing that I'm going to do is font size, and that I'm going to set it to 25. So our input box is ready. Let me see if I can type something in it. This text input component comes with a property or props called as placeholder. This placeholder property is actually used to set some default text value here in the text input box. So I'm going to enter something like this, enter a new task. So as you can see, the default text has come here. Now if I'm writing some task here, learn React Native, there should be some place where this added task has to be saved. For that, I'm going to use the famous React Native hooks of useState. First of all, I'm going to import the useState. And then let's use it. First off, I'm going to start by writing const, then the array symbol. This of course is your own personal choice. And then a function to change or set this new task. I'm going to change this n as camel case. Using the useState for now, I'm going to keep it as empty. Suppose now if I enter a new task here in the text input component, for example, plan a trip to Hyderabad. This new task should be saved inside this particular memory space that I've created just now using the useState. For that, I'm going to create a function. I'm calling this function add new task. And in this function, I'm going to use this set new task function for setting this particular task, that is plan a trip to Hyderabad, inside this new task. Here in the function, I'm going to pass the value as entered text. Now after creating this particular function add new task, it is not guaranteed that the task that we have entered, that is plan a trip to Hyderabad, will be saved inside the new task, because this function has to be called as we are writing the text here. So for that, React Native provides a prop in the text input component. It is called as onChangeText. Now what this onChangeText does is, whatever function you write here gets called while the text changes. So I want to call the function that I've just now created, that is add new task. Now what is actually happening here is, as I'm writing a new task, the text is changing, and as the text is changing, this function is getting called. We can check that as well by creating a simple text component. So as you can see, even though it is very small, the word plan is coming, and if I write plan a trip to Nagarhole, the text is coming. Now it will be so much better if we had two buttons, one for adding the tasks and another for deleting it. So let us go ahead and do that. So this is not needed anymore. That was just for checking whether the function is working or not. Now I'm going to create a view, and inside that we first need to import touchable opacity from the React Native library. And I'll be making two buttons using these two touchable opacities. I personally like touchable opacities more than the actual button component because it offers a lot more styling options than the button. Now inside the first button or the touchable opacity, I'm going to write on add, and then in the next one I'm going to mention clear. Now let us go ahead and style these two buttons. So down below here, I'm going to create a label, call it as a button design. And before writing things here, I'm going to attach it first. Styles is the name of my style sheet, and then button design is the label. I'm going to do the same for the other button as well. Adding the design in the component actually makes it easier to see the changes real time. So if you don't like something, like some style, you can change it. So that is why I have added it. Now let's go ahead and add some background color. First of all, I have prepared a color in the RGBA notation. You can very well use the hex code as well if you like. However, the color that I'm using, I like it personally. I hope you like it too. And 230 is the red value for that. 191 is green. Next comes blue, which is 131, and alpha value, that is the opacity, I'm going to set it to 0.3. Okay, there you go. This is the background color that I've selected because it's going with the theme. And next I'll set some width to 80 and height to 40. Border color, I'm going to keep it as plain black. Next is border width. 1 should be good. And last is border radius. To add some curveness in the border, 20 should be a good number. So there you go. It looks good. Now also it will be better if we style the text inside the buttons as well. So next I'm going to style the text. I'm going to give it a label called as text design. And then you guessed it right, I'm going to go ahead and add it before actually making any changes. Same style sheet, that is styles, and then the label, that is text design. I'm going to copy it and use it for the next text as well. Now the very first thing that I'm going to add is going to be font size. I've set it to 25. Next is align self. In that I'm going to set it to center. The last thing that I'm going to do is going to give some margin, and preferably just at the top. 5 should be good. Now the buttons look nice, however they are not positioned as I want them to be. I want them to be side by side, but the default nature of the components is to get aligned column wise, that is one below the other. So if I need to change it, I need to change the flex direction to row, and that's exactly what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go up, and this view, which is the parent of the buttons or the touchable opacity, that is going to be get styled. I'm going to use inline style. So for that, 2 curly braces instead of 1. So first thing is of course going to be flex direction, and as mentioned I'm going to set it to row. Perfect. Now the elements or the components are coming side by side. It looks way better than it was looking previously. Next, I'm going to set the width using the relative terms, that is percentage instead of the actual absolute values. If you use the percentage, it is going to set the value according to the device width. So if your device is small or big, doesn't matter, the width is going to be 80% of that device width and nothing is going to cut off. Next, I'm going to give some margin to the top and some margin to the left because it is stuck too much to the side. Margin left 40. Justify content, that I'm going to set it to space between. So in case you are wondering about the values, you can very much play with the options here, but since I've made this app beforehand, so I think that works the best for me. However, the designing part you can adjust according to your liking. Lastly, I'm going to do align items, and that is going to be center. Okay. It's looking way better now, although these buttons are not doing anything. So first of all, let us make this clear button work. And if I write something that is YouTube, what I basically want from this button clear is that if I click on this clear button, the task that I have entered should get cleared. So for that, I'm going to scroll down to this touchable opacity. Here, I'm going to use the property of on press and just going to use an empty function here. And then I'm going to call this set new task, and then I'm going to set it to empty. The clear button is not working because there is one last thing that we need to do inside the text input component. So I'm going to go up, and here I'm going to pass the value as new task, and then it should work perfectly. Let us check it. Any value that you enter here, and if you press the clear button, then it is going to get deleted. So that's fine. What this value is doing, it's creating a binding between the use state and the text input box. So whatever task we are writing here gets stored inside the value props, and then that task can be erased very easily using this clear button. Now moving on, let us talk about this add button. If I write some task here, for example task 1, and when I click on this add button, I want two things to happen. First of all, this task 1 should be stored somewhere, and secondly, it should display the task on the app. For storing, we will be using use state, and in that we will be using an array because there are going to be many tasks. For example, if I write task 1, then I also will have task 2, and so on. So for that, storing as a list or an array is going to be our best choice. So let us go ahead and use the use state for storing the list of all the tasks. First, I'm going to create task list and then update task list. This is going to be the function that we'll use for updating this task list. Now initially it is of course going to be empty, so I'm going to create an empty list or an empty array, and then I'm going to create a function that is going to update this task list. I'm going to call it as add new tasks to list, and in this function I'm going to call the update task list, and here since it is a list I'm going to use the spread operator. First, I'm going to write on task list, comma, new task. The reason I've used spread operator is there are going to be some tasks already present inside the list. So what it is going to do is it's going to take the new task that we enter inside here, the text input, and then it is going to add that new task into the already existing list. Now next, I'm going to create a text that is going to display the task list. So here, just below these touchable opacities, I'm going to create a text. And then here I'm going to write on task list. Now finally, we have to call the function that we have created on press of this add button. So this is the add button here. I'll use the props of on press once again. I'm going to pass an empty function here. And then I'm going to call the function add new. Might as well copy it. Don't forget to put the parentheses. And now let us check. I'm going to write down task 1. There you go, task 1 is coming and the clear button is also working. Let us go ahead and add task 2 now. This is also coming, so it's working fine. The task 2 got added to the already present task 1 that is there in the list. So speaking functionally, the two buttons are working. However, it is not getting displayed properly. It should be one after the other. So that we are going to solve using the FlatList. Before using the FlatList component, there are some things that we need to change in the task list first. So suppose this is our task list and here all the tasks are present. Task 1, task 2 and so on. For displaying these tasks properly one after the other, every task should have a unique ID associated with it. Only if each task has a unique ID, the FlatList will be able to display all the components and all the tasks properly. Also, suppose if I am done with task 1 and I want to delete it, this unique ID will make sure that only this particular task gets deleted and not the other task. So first of all, we need to generate unique IDs for each and every tasks present inside the list. So here in this function where we are updating the task list, I'm going to generate the unique ID. ID is to math.random. This is going to generate a random number. However, we want string, so I'm going to convert that to string. So I'll write on toString. This is a normal JavaScript function that is used to convert a number to a string. And here I'm going to mention a value, and that is going to be the new task. This value element, by the way, is also needed by FlatList. That is why I have mentioned here. Let's go ahead and import the FlatList component from the React Native library. I'll create a parent view component first, and inside here I'm going to use the FlatList component. I'll make it as self-closing. FlatList actually accepts 3 props. The first one is called as key extractor. Key extractor is basically for the ID that we have just now created. I'm going to mention item here, and then I'm going to write on item.id. This ID, by the way, is the same ID that we have just now created using the math_random function. The next property that it is going to accept is going to be data. And data, of course, is our task list. This task list contains all the list of the tasks that we have entered. Next and the final thing is going to be render item. Render item is basically for the way you want to render the tasks on the screen, as in how you want to display the tasks on the screen. I'm going to write on item data here. Next, I'm going to create one more view. I'm going to close this view manually because it doesn't seem to be working automatically. And then the text that I had created down here is going to go up. So I'm going to cut it and put it here. And it's no longer going to be just task list though. It's going to be item data dot item dot value, because the tasks are stored inside the value element. Now let us go ahead and have a look at it. Task 1, I'm going to press add. Task 1 is appearing on the screen here, and let's go ahead and clear it. Task 2, and task 2 is appearing below task 1. So far it's good. Next, I'm going to style this text as well. So of course I'm going to use this style sheet. I'm going to give it a label. I'm going to call it as task design. These labels of course are your personal preference and your choice. You can go ahead and use any label that you want. First thing is going to be background color. I'm going to use the same RGBA notation that I have been using so far. RGBA. The red value is going to be 230. Green is going to be 191. Blue is going to be 131. And alpha value or the transparency is going to be 0.3. Next, I'm going to set the width to 90%. That is almost the entire width of the screen. Height is going to be 30. That is 30 pixels. And some padding to the left because the tasks were coming too much towards the left hand side. So there should be some space left in the left. And I'm going to save it, Control S, and let us go ahead and check one more time. Task 1. Yeah, of course it is not coming because I forgot to actually add the label here. The name of our style sheet, that is going to be styles dot the label task design. Last try. Yeah, it's coming perfectly now, although the size is not correct, so that's one more thing that I need to do here. But the background color and other things are coming fine. It's going with the theme, that is why I have chosen this color. Now let us go ahead and add the font size. That was the last thing remaining. Font size, I think 25. Font size, I'll set it to 25. Yes, good. It's looking nice. And if I keep on pressing add, it's going to go out of the screen. So when something like this happens, when the elements or the components are going out of the screen, then we need to wrap these components in a scroll view that will help us to see the things that are getting cut off. So I'm going to import the scroll view first from the React Native library. And then where we are rendering the items, that is where we are displaying the item, I'm going to wrap everything inside the scroll view. This shouldn't end here. It should be at the very bottom. So as you can see, now we are able to scroll the tasks. We need to style this view a little bit more because I want some space in between the two tasks. Moving on, we need to have a mechanism that will allow us to delete the task once it is done. For that, I'm thinking I'll create a delete button over here, and if you press on the delete button, then the corresponding task should get deleted. So inside this same view, I'm going to create a touchable opacity button. Here we can add a text like we would normally do, and then we can write down delete here. So delete is not coming properly, it is coming below task 1, however it should come this side. And this is happening because by default the flex direction is column. We need to change it to row so that it comes side by side. For that, I'm going to first of all style this view. I'm going to use the inline style this time, and I'm going to style here only, starting with flex direction, and I'm going to set it to row. Next comes the width. This is the parent component, and I'm going to set it to 80%. Next is margin top. I'm giving margin top because there were no spaces between the two tasks. And then margin left. 40 should be good. Next is justify content. I'll set it to space between. You can play with these values, but in my opinion, space between works the best here. And align items, that I'm going to set it to center. I'm going to go ahead and save it. My simulator is acting weird now, so I have to press Ctrl C for exiting and stopping the server. I have to restart it, I guess. Okay, so our simulator is back and it's up and running. Let us go ahead and give it a try. Much better. So this is what I was talking about. These two things, these two components, that is the text which contains our task and the delete button, it should be side by side. We can go ahead and add another task to see how is that coming. Perfect. There is some space or some gap between the two tasks. That is coming because we have left some margin top. This empty space is also making this entire app look a little bit clean and neat. Now, even though the app is looking better than how it was looking previously, I'm not too happy about it because this delete button or the touchable opacity component is not too aesthetic. What I mean by that is it will look way better if instead of this text we have some image. So that's what we are exactly going to do next. We are going to replace this text with an image. So for adding an image onto a touchable opacity and make it work like a button, first of all we have to have the image, and I have downloaded this image from Google again, and then I'm going to import it by dragging it inside our assets folder. The text is no longer required, so I'm going to delete the text, and we need to import the image component first of all. So I'm going to go ahead and import that from the React Native library and then use that component here. Image is going to be a self-closing component, and I'll write on source. Source is basically the address of the image, where your image is present. So I'm going to write on require as well, then give quotes, a dot and a /. Now our image is present inside the assets folder, so I'm going to select this folder name and then one more /, and then finally we have to write on the name of our image, that is a delete hyphen button. Oh, by mistake I wrote 3 T's. .png. Something weird is happening, and I know the button is here, but again the styling is missing, so We need to style it, we need to make it small and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and style this button using the style sheet. I am going to call it as a delete button. And I'm not going to style it much, only width. I'll set it to 30 pixels and height to 30 pixels, and I think that should do the work. Let us go ahead and add this design here. The name of our style sheet, that is styles dot delete button. For checking, I'm going to enter one task and then let me add another task. Let me add one task for you. And yeah, so the layout is looking perfect. The button is looking good. The tasks are coming, and if we keep on adding, it's scrolling, but it is going out of this particular area. I want all the tasks to be here, and at the bottom I'm planning to make one more button that is going to be delete all. That is, if you want to delete all the tasks at once, you can do that, but that's something for the end. For now, we are concerned about making this button work. What we want from this button is, if we press this button, this corresponding tasks should get deleted and none of the tasks should get affected. So that is going to be easy because we have already created a unique ID for all these tasks. So we just need to pass that ID and then the task is going to get deleted. For achieving that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new function. I'm going to call it as a delete task. I'm going to pass the argument as ID here. Then I'm going to use this update task list function that we have created in the use state for updating the task list. And we will be applying the filter function. I'm passing another value. I'm going to call it as current goals. And here I'll mention current goals dot ID not equals ID. And that's it. For understanding this function, we have to keep in mind one thing, that all these tasks have a unique ID which is represented by this ID. And then when I'm calling this function update task list, it is taking the task list that contains all the tasks and then it is applying a filter. What the filter is going to do is, the filter is going to check each and every task, and if the task ID doesn't match with the ID that we have selected, that is the ID of the task we want to delete, then it is going to keep the task and it is going to return a list that has all the tasks present apart from the task that we are trying to delete. In other words, if you click on this delete button, then the task ID gets registered, and apart from that ID, all the other tasks are going to be left unaffected and that task is going to get deleted. It is done by this operator, which means not. If the goal ID is not equal to the ID that we have selected, it is going to keep it unaffected. So the last thing for making this button work is to call this delete task on the press of this button. So I'm going to go down to the touchable opacity, and with the help of on press props, I'm going to call that function. I'm just passing an empty function, and then I'm going to call this function, which is delete task. And of course, we have to pass the ID as well, that is stored inside item data dot item dot ID. Now let us check if it is working. Yes, task 1 got deleted successfully. Let us give it one more try. Task 2 is also getting deleted. And if we keep on pressing, all the tasks are going to get deleted. I'm adding some dummy tasks here for the purpose of correcting the layout. The task should not cross this line. It should be well within this boundary. So we have to use the property of flex for doing that. So I'm going to search for the main view component, that is the parent component in which the child FlatList component is residing. So if we style this view, it is going to solve the problem that we are facing. So I'm going to use the inline style. I'm going to set flex to 0.8. That means I want the tasks to be present only on 80% of the screen, and probably I'll give some margin top as well. Let us see how that looks like. I need to have a dummy task here. Learn React Native. Yes, it's looking much better now. And since we have some space here, I'm going to create a delete button that is going to delete everything on the task list at once. So let us go ahead and do that. So at the very end where our flat list is ending, I'm going to create a view. This view is going to include the touchable opacity button. And then I'm going to create a text component as well. And I'm going to mention delete all, maybe with capital A. Delete all is coming, and we need to style it. So I'm going to use the previous style sheet or the label that we have used for the add and the clear button. So I'm going to do this styles, that is the name of our style sheet, and if I remember correctly, it was button design. Good. And then let us style the text as well. Style equals the name of our style sheet again, which is styles, and I think it was text design this time. The text is coming properly, however the button width is not that much, so the text is not able to fit in properly. We need some extra styling on the button, so in that case you just put this style inside a square bracket, give a comma, and then mention width to whatever you want. And since it is in JSON format, this has to be put inside the curly brackets as well. So this button is coming properly, but the position is not correct, so we need to style this view. For that, I'm going to use the style sheet and I'm going to create a label and name it as button container. The first thing that I'm going to do is assign the flex property, and I'll set it to 0.1. That means I want button container to occupy only 10% of the screen. Align self, that I'm going to set it to center. I'll give some margin top. I'll set it to 25. And nothing is happening because we have not added this button container label onto our view. Style equals styles dot button container. Now it's much better to see. The last thing that I'm going to do is going to give some margin bottom, and that I think it should be negative because it is way too much at the top. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, so I like this layout. I'm pretty happy with it. And lastly, these two buttons, they are very far away from each other, so that has to be fixed. So if we go up here and search for the parent view that is containing both the buttons, so instead of 80%, I'm going to change it to 50%, and then margin left I'm going to increase from 40 to 80, or maybe to 110. So I'm pretty happy with the layout. Let us give it one more try. Task 1 I'll add, task 2 I'll add, and I'll keep on adding just to see if everything is fine. The scroll view is working fine. The delete options are working, and the clear is also working. However, the delete all is not working. So that's the last thing to do, and then our app will be all set. So I'm going to find the touchable opacity, that is the delete all button. And here, let's use the on press props one last time. Just an empty function, and then update task list, and that should be updated to an empty list. That means it is going to empty the entire list, and when all the tasks in the list is deleted, that is when it is empty, nothing is going to be present on the screen. So for checking it for one last final time, I am adding tasks. Let me go ahead and add some 4 tasks, and if I click on delete all the tasks are getting deleted. So there you go, our very simplistic yet powerful to-do list app is done. Hope you have liked the video.